Captain Agenda Lilpaw stalked into the mess hall, ready to kill the next woman who demanded that one of the humans bunk with her. Her hackles were up, and her crew cleared a path as she prowled forward, many of them choking as they did so, as most of them seemed to be filleting their meals rather than eating them. A dangerous proposition when the main course was skewered meat with a side of roasted tubers and some veggies for balance, a bit of everything, so that every type of digestion was accounted for. Hundreds of otherwise hardened pirates are grinding their thighs together and clearly daring each other to be the first one to jump the small gaggle of males in the middle of the room. There's a ring around them that starts nearly 4 meters from the lot. One side, you thirsty idiots. Eat your food, stop playing with it, and then get back to work for pity's sake, she orders, shoving several crew members out of her way and, sitting right next to them, Captain, the nearest male, larger than the rest, with very dark skin and short, neat braided rows in his dark hair, salutes her. She scowls. Right, no salutes. Sorry, he says. Do you idiots know how many demands I've gotten about your sleeping arrangements? She hisses at them in a simmering rage. 5 to 10 times the actual population of the ship. One of them mentions, wait, that's almost it, exactly as it was, roughly 7.3 times. You shit's been hacking the ship. Again? Yes'm. The same one answers. He's smaller and has a flatter face, with somewhat paler skin, and short dark hair, and a pair of corrective glass lenses resting on his nose, that has arms that reach back to his ears. It's very easy. Christ, Ryu, you're gonna drive. Her to drink. The largest one notes with a shake of his head. I already drink. Agenda huffs, eyeing the half-full pitcher of booze in the middle of the table. Drive her to drink more. Not that this horse piss really counts as a proper drink. The next biggest one states, he's a study in opposites, with the other large, just as big, smaller only by a tiny measurement, but pale in all aspects, from nearly white skin, to yellow-tinged hair, to pale blue eyes. What's a horse? And why are you comparing our booze to its piss? Because this stuff is weak as piss. And a horse is a herd and draft animal. Our species domesticated in antiquity. We even rode the bastards to war. The pale big one says, shaking the pitcher and taking a sniff before glancing over at Agenda. Speaking of horses, Captain, you look like you've been run down by a herd of 'em. Brent notices from 3 places down. He then grabs his plate and wipes it down before putting his last skewer back on it. Load it up with your spares, gents. He orders, holding the plate out before wiping off his fork and putting onto this plate even as samples of tubers, vegetables, and a few more skewers are piled onto it. It lands in front of her as a massive mouth-watering mound of food with a half-full pitcher of booze right beside it. She pauses. You know that bribing me with food and drink from my own damn kitchen is a shit attempt at currying favor, right? She asks. That only matters if it doesn't work, Captain. The large dark one notes, and she snorts in amusement before grabbing 2 of the skewers and all but inhaling the meat off them in her hunger. After the first bite of temptation is taken, her restraint vanishes, and she savages the meal with all she has. She has to use the booze as more of a dining aid so that she doesn't choke on a couple of occasions before letting out a satisfied sigh. The sound of restrained laughter has her glare at the cretinous males forced into her crew, and they clamp down on it tighter, but are clearly even more amused. Her mood is improved with a full stomach, regardless of the terrible company, and she takes a moment to sort her thoughts. All right, you punks, your quarters are sorted out. This ship has 6 levels, and you're on the 2nd. Forward left, we use it for storage when we take on a glut of plunder. It's up to you to furnish it, And I don't care how. Buy, borrow, make or steal. I really don't care. If you are sleeping anywhere else, it's only with the express invitation of everyone in that room. Get it? So from how thirsty these girls are. We're mostly just using that room to store our stuff. Take it. The one sitting opposite of Brent asks. His skin is pale but speckled with bits of brown, and his hair is an odd copper color. Hey, you might finally get laid, Freckles. One at the end teases and gets an upraised middle finger from the one nicknamed Freckles. Oh, fuck all of you. I'm gonna check on the engines. They're rattling really weird. Freckles curses as he goes to stand. Wait! What did you say about my engines? Agenda demands, and he looks kind of sheepish. It's probably just me, Mom. I've got hypersensitivity with hearing and touch, so I have a high-pitched whine with a little clicky click buzzing in my ear. Typical Canadian. One of them further down notes. Bold and round of head, but just as strong-looking as the rest. He's pale and shiny. From the head he clearly polishes, for some reason. Yeah, the dude's the friendly and polite Canadian. Almost to the point of parody, but it's authentic. Catch him off guard and he's still friendly and polite. That's how you know it's real. Brent finishes and notices Agenda frowning. What? Canadian. Is that some kind of subspecies? Country. Humans are a very divided species. The project to actually build and crew. The Dauntless is one of the first truly international efforts. The only thing our race almost completely agrees on, with only the craziest and most superstitious people arguing against it. Me and Jake over. They're both American. Brent points to the large, dark-skinned man. Our home country shares the world's largest unprotected border with Canada, Franklin's country. Ryu is Japanese, an island nation. I am Victor of Russia. The larger pale one says. Egypt is my homeland. Beck is my name, says. The one next to Jake. I am Lu, a Chinese man, says the smaller man next to Victor. Jean-Luc of France. And you bastards shut the fuck up right now. One of the ones near the end says, before snapping at the rest. Some of them put their hands in the air in surrender, but everyone is smiling. A few are even holding back snickers. What am I missing? Agenda asks. I share my name with a main character from a popular science fiction series. I've heard unending jokes during training in transit. There is nothing these idiots can say that I haven't heard too many times as is. Jean-Luc mutters, I mean, good God, I'm basically the man's opposite, but for the name. What more do you guys want? To know if you want your tea, Picard. Brent mocks him and nearly throws himself out of his seat to dodge the thrown mug. Beck catches it, then seems to toast him with it and a mocking smile. Fuck all of you. I'm going. Jean-Luc snarls. Standing up and stomping out, Brent just makes a face at him as he goes. Don't forget, 4 hours Rambo-thon Deck 4. Victor calls after him and gets a thumbs up just as Jean-Luc leaves the room. Rambo is? Movie series. The first one is the only one we might not play, but the rest is some good action. We're basically taking over the tactical center on 4 to do this. Brent answers offhandedly. That happens every day anyways. If it's not in active use, then go wild. Just don't break it. Agenda remarks as she sees her crew finally start to relax around the men and filter in to sit at the same table. So there's 10 in total, but I've got 8 names only. Miles, Franklin, Jake, Ryu, Victor, Beck, Lou, and Jean-Luc. Who are the last 2? Marcus. I'm Roman. The round-headed one says quickly, before taking his last bite of his skewer. I am Sai. My family hails from India. Though with the traditions of my homelands, I doubt I shall ever return. There is a dim view on piracy and such back home, even if it is sanctioned. What? One of her crew asks. Honestly, Agenda was expecting this sooner. Or more likely, it was C that it bothered the most. My home country is somewhat bound by an archaic caste system. I had to let go of many of my ideas and tenets of faith to merely pass the tests. Would I return even after 20 years of flawless service spending, but a day with pirates, and the knock-on effects will be huge. These pirates are more advanced than nearly the entirety of India. It won't take much for you to spin it properly, Marcus tries to assure him. No, unless there's a major shift of my people working alongside pirates, means that one will be taking the lives of others without it being in the defense of life. This is a tainting of my flesh. To remain untainted, others are not to touch me. I have become untouchable. Only in India, and scorn will fall upon them if you make it known. Then they will be untouchable. If they're wise, then they shall know this and abide. Beck counters, but it clearly doesn't land. I doubt it. Still, I choose the stars. Excuse me, Sci remarks, standing up and grabbing the empty trays of Ruse and Franklin before heading to the kitchen. You gonna be there for the movies? Victor calls after him, and he nods before leaving. Several crew members chase after him, no doubt seeking to comfort the poor man. You've all burned bridges, haven't you? Agenda asks, as she reads the sheer weight that seems to have fallen on the men. Even going on the initial mission was burning a lot of bridges. We've severed friendships and familial ties for a shot at the stars. The smart money was on the ship being attacked, and everyone inside taken as slaves. The fact we've subverted it doesn't make things much better. Jake explains, before running a hand over the tight rows in his hair. Hell, I'm still wrapping my head around it, and I've got criminals in the family. We're more black ops than mafia, Victor says, and Jake nods after huffing a breath. As a small argument breaks out, a small alert goes off on her wrist computer, and she checks it before rolling her eyes. Another small bit of stupid at the helm. The girls there couldn't find filth in a sewer, made them great at taking orders without question, and even better in a fight as they were generally too stupid to know if they were in danger, but hot garbage for when she wasn't there to babysit them. Franklin sits down into the plush, butt-patched chair in the briefing room, exhausted but ecstatic. It all made sense. The engine, the energies, and the way it balanced itself. It gave him ideas. Wonderful, remarkable ideas that a hand smacks him in the back of the head, and he lashes out to the side and backhands Ryu in the ribs. You are an idiot, the Japanese soldier states plainly. The hell do you know? I fixed the engine and missed the fact that Mabby was all but humping. You as you did it. She what? Franklin demands as there are snorts and chuckles around him. Lay off the poor bastard. He doesn't get it, Jake remarks, even as he swishes around a clear liquid before taking a deep drink and grimacing in disgust. Yes, but if he gets any denser, he'll have his own gravity. Victor replies with a friendly grin as Franklin groans. The Russian man is past the sample of the drink from Jake and looks like he swallowed vinegar after just sniffing it. This is more ethanol than proper vodka. First batch. We need to refine the still and find out how the bitch wants to work with us. Victor says ruefully. You fuckers already set up a still, Franklin demands, and there's some shrugs. All around, 3, vodka, moonshine, and beer. Also, you said you know how to make mead, Victor asks, and there's a nod from the nerd. Yeah, it's easy. Some honey and water and brewer's yeast in a sealed glass container. Sit it in some dark, dry corner for a month or 3, and you've got mead. Liter or gallon? Victor. Presses. Gallon's best. But you can crank it up hard. I don't know the ratios offhand, but I've got on file somewhere. Franklin replies, tossing his datapad to Victor, who starts studying through it. You have nearly 1,500 words in bullet point about the eccentricities of the engine. Victor notes, that is a small essay's worth. Sci remarks, do you even know the difference between passion and obsession? Lou demands, if I say no, will you guys knock it off? Franklin demands before thinking. Wait a second. There's no way in fuck you lunatics put the steels together and brood. Some hooch in less than a day. What's going on? We just moved our operation here. The Dauntless had about 30 illicit stills. Up and running, and we got a good run of each type. Victor explains, before taking another sip and outright wincing. We should not have. Started in 0G. The spills were insane, and the product is nasty. If nothing else, we've got Molotov fuel. Jean-Luc notes thoughtfully. If you girls are done bitching at each other and spreading gossip, the movie's about to kick off. We're skipping the first Rambo because there isn't a big enough body count and cranking the volume up. Brent says, activating the holoprojector and the speakers. With even the general sounds of the movie blaring loudly, the men start whispering and scheming among each other. Before Rambo is even properly introduced, they've all told Franklin some variation of, pick up the Catwoman, French her, and let her take the lead from there. Franklin, for his part, has told each and every one of them their own variant of fuck off. As explosions ring out, arrows fly, and knives sink into the meaty bits of sadistic scumbags, they generally plan things out and come to a few important decisions and realizations. You know, guys, I've been doing some digging. They're not going to call us human out there. The list of sentient races, the galaxy over, is insanely huge. Outside of whatever the fuck it is that's blanketing the Sol system, most worlds are habitable and inhabited. So much so that there's too much overlap. Best I can tell, our own race will be classified as BMO 100, 100 Ma 1, or bipedal, mammal, omnivore, 100 per 100 number 1. Brent muses, after a particularly sadistic scene with mines. Really? So it's how you get around, what kind of animal you are, what you eat, man to woman ratio, and how many others like you there are. Jean-Luc asks and gets a nod. What are the other classifications? Well, the first one can also be a Q, M, T, or a W, or quadruped, multiple, tail, or wings. Multiple is a catch-all for the odder ones, like spiders or tentacles. The rest are obvious. Second category is what general part of the animal kingdom it's in. Mammals are most common. Generally, the third is just carnivore, herbivore, and omnivore, but apparently there are some plant people out there. Most of the sex divides are at 1 per 100 and have never before gone better than 10 per 100. The last number goes over 100 in some places. That is a dizzying array of alien life. Lou notes with a far-off expression on his face as he tries to picture it all. And each and every one has multiple native languages, history, cultures, and standards, not counting the ones that have broken off into subspecies and independent colonies, religions and cults, and all the other dividing lines. The only unique things about humanity and Earth are our terrible location, and shockingly, even gender ratio. Brent groans as he mentally goes through the ship roster he scanned and realizes that few of them actually come from the same species. Easy travel between planets means you get places where all the cultures run together until nothing distinct remains. The first person to suggest memorizing such things will be waking up duct taped to the warp drive. Franklin cuts in, and there's a moment of silence as everyone mentally agrees. Right, well, moving on. Just remember that no matter what happens, these girls are pirates. They're criminals and killers. They were trying to be slavers, and likely will try rape, Make sure you've got protection at all times. And I'm not talking about rubbers. Brent finishes up, and everyone holds up a pistol. Good. Remember, we don't owe them sex. We don't owe them love. And if they try and force it, show them your training, he says, and there are sober nods as the guns are checked and carefully tucked back away. Not to say it's a bad thing if you find it. Just remember, your terms, not theirs, Brent remarks, before slouching into his seat. The conversation is done and the movie is ramping up. Meanwhile, in the hallway, I'm hideous. I have to be. I nearly crawled into his pants, and he refused to even acknowledge it. Mabby bowls over Agenda, who can barely resist shaking the stupid girl. Mabby, she tries. I'm going to die alone and unloved. The Feely wails. Mabby, she pushes a little harder. My line dies with me, because I can't grab a man, even when he's all but thrown at. The wailing engineer is cut off with a harsh shake from her captain. Mabby! He has a mental disorder. It's in his file. He's denser than a brick of tritite when it comes to social things. Anything short of dragging him into your bunk and dancing down his dick will go over his head. She struggles not to snarl. It won't help the situation. Really? Mabby asks, with a sniff. Yes. He's on this mission because he's fanatically obsessed with what he thought was science fiction. The idea of having an adventure in space is basically what he's always wanted since he was small. He's getting that now, so it will take borderline blunt force trauma to get him to notice anything else. So apply the blunt force trauma and move on, all right? Agenda prefers her drama away from vital systems of the ship and those that maintain them. Really? Apparently Mabby's having a hard time swallowing this. I've spoken to the other men. They're literally telling him he's an idiot for not noticing even as we speak. Agenda says, and the few crew nearby are staring, but she can all but feel the gazes of most of her crew through the security system. Girls, they evolved in cruel space. Proper technology doesn't work there. They have no adepts. The same horrible stuff that will make your body shut down and tear itself to pieces is their normal. We're lucky that they don't produce it themselves instead of just being immune to it. You can't expect them to act like normal men. They're all soldiers. Soldiers that signed up for what may very well be a suicide mission into the unknown and unknowable. Captain, we got that when the men repelled us with crude kinetics, when we were rocking well-made and well-loved mechanoid assault suits. 10 girls died to that debacle, and I'm not making that mistake again. They're dangerous. They're not the pampered little princes that is the modern man. These are would-be warlords that just so happen to have something swinging between the legs instead of bouncing on the front and back. Her head of assault, Mercy, nicknamed ironically, says with a snarl. The winged woman on all fours takes a deep breath and grins. Still, think of the children. Girls so tough they can survive in cruel space. Girls so vicious that even their fathers are killers. Girls so enduring that they can work for 8 hours straight with barely a break and consider it routine. Routine, Agenda asks. The men had set up 2 distinct production facilities and got them running, moved into a new ship, ran engine maintenance, and did a quick inventory of all their supplies. The work of days done in a third of one. I've got the ears, Captain, the bat-like woman says, before reaching up with one wing to flick the massive thing on the right side of her head. I've been listening to them as much as they've been listening to us. They've worked what they consider a standard shift. They've done it at a relaxing, indulgent pace. They have each done the work of 5 women apiece, and were taking their sweet time. Their race, the human, is skillful, tough, and enduring. That alone makes them valuable, massively male on top of it. We're going to be the envy of every gang. in this branch of the galaxy, at least until their superiors start hiring more bands. You want one of them for the first night, don't you? Agenda asks, and Mercy flinches. Oh, for pity's sake. Which one? The dark-skinned one, Mercy asks. Jake? Yes, him. The Sonia confirms. Just so you know. She tries to warn her subordinate of something that each of the men messaged her. 10 different iterations of, I'm okay with sex, but if I'm cornered, I'm shooting my way out. He will shoot me if I try and force it, I know. I want a clear run at him without interference. Fine, whatever. So long as I get a deep dicking, I don't care. Hump down and bond yourself to whichever one you want. Just make sure you register when you get knocked up, and who the daddy is. Yes, Captain, Mercy says with a smile revealing her fangs. Agenda isn't intimidated or fooled. Crazy Woman's an herbivore with a major sweet tooth. She can't digest meat and can barely stomach vegetables and tubers. That goes. For everyone, keep injuries to a minimum when fighting for these boys. We have a raid coming up fast, and I want every woman ready and able for it. Aye, Captain, Mercy replies, before Agenda gives a vicious grin. Now, I've actually got an idea for the men that they'll probably like. They won't be in danger, so the girls won't be distracted, but they'll be buying us a lot of time, and the fact they kinda look like nearly a dozen different races across the galaxy will help. Only at first, Captain. These are without a doubt the most aggressive, hard-bitten and tough men outside cruel space. That's bound to get attention, Mercy reminds her. Yes it is. Tell me, Mercy, do you think our boys would be up for a city-spanning brawl to serve as a distraction? Agenda asks, and Mercy looks shocked, before grinning so wide that her every fang gleams in the light. I'll take that as a yes. With some fake frenzy patches, we could also seriously smoke our trail. But first, why don't we ask them? Mercy asks, with a cackle as she rushes the door to the hall. Hey boys, holy shit, she exclaims, as she watches an incredibly well-built and grizzled man reduce another to nothing more than red paste with a vehicle-grade weapon. The scene is paused, and 10 men look right at her, even as she gets a good look at the action star covered in gore. That's the kind of thing you like to watch, yes? One of them asks, and she blinks before shaking a bit. Clearly this needs to be a whole crew kind of thing. Anyways, we've got a plan for you punks in our snatch and grab with our former boss. You boys up for running distraction through the city in an escalating brawl. Sounds fun. The one that spoke up earlier, Ryu says, by the by, Batgirl. Mercy says to correct him, and he grins. Got any plans tonight? He asks, with an obvious leer, and her jaw drops, and she flutters a bit. Then she gets control again, and smiles widely. Well, I was going to go for the bigger one, but if you're so eager, I guess I'm doing you, Mercy says with a leer of her own. He's smaller than the dark one, but when it comes to these men, if they're not made of chiseled stone, then they're made of braided wire. Ryu is one of the wiry ones. Fantastic! What room and time? Forward. First, right after the firing tubes, on deck 3. Whenever you've got the guts to be there, I'll rip membrane if you show up. Mercy purrs at him, and Ryu looks back to the rest of the group. He then says something to the rest of them in a human language. And there's a gale of laughter as he vaults over the seat he was in and charges out. Come on, Bat Tits, we're getting freaky, he calls, racing down the hallway. And Mercy manages to regain herself and chase after him, only to be hit in the face by his jacket, which he shed during the race. Her look of shock turns to one of primal hunger and lust as the scent of his pheromones hit with the force of a meteor. Her body burning with want, she soars after him as hard as she can. her wings brushing both sides of the ship's hallways, even as she gathers more and more of his shed clothing in her hind claws. A trail that leads to her personal chamber, with his undergarments over the handle to her door. She takes them inside and throws the bundle to the side, even as she starts tearing off her suddenly much too tight clothing. "What took you so long?" "I might have gotten cold waiting," Ryu teases from atop her bed, even as she peels her panties off her burning needed to plan all the ways I'm going to have you fuck me pregnant. Mercy huffs out as she gives up getting the cloth off normally and just rips through it to get it off and away. She gives out a lust-filled huff, and as she breathes in, he moves and his tongue is in her mouth and hungry. His hands go all over, squeezing and teasing her breasts and sending tingles of excitement through her. They feel all over her body and settle on her rump as the kiss breaks away and she's lifted up and against his erection. "Like you're in skin-tight velvet," he says, taking a few steps with his fingers, sinking into her rear and flopping her onto her own bed. "How much do you want it?" he demands with his shaft, just barely teasing her cunt. "I want it," she moans, feeling the heat. Some part of her mind is vaguely aware that the door is still open, but doesn't care. "How badly?" he whispers into her ears, sending them in a flutter and a thrill of excitement down her spine. He wants to play. She can play. After she gets what she needs. Her legs lock behind his waist and pull him in, filling the burning need and emptiness. The flash of pain as the final barrier is torn through, but it's swept away in the heady feeling of fullness. "That's bad," he says, even as he reaches around her back and pulls her up for a kiss. "First time?" he asks her, and she looks away. He pulls out and she tries to pull him back. Then he slams into her with an obscene slapping noise that sends a blast of pleasure through her. "Relax. I'll walk you through it." He purrs at her before kissing her along the jaw. Then he starts pounding into her. Every slapping thrust sends fireworks through her mind that refuse to fade away and only build and build until she screams out in ecstasy. As she pulls him in closely and clenches hard, warmth flows through her and she slumps back onto her bed, her vision bleary, but a deep sense of satisfaction fills her. She lays back, spent and satisfied to the core of her being. This is what it means to have a husband. How perfect, how utterly the sensation of skilled and calloused hands kneading her breasts sends spark of pleasure and warmth through her. She opens her eyes and sees that Ryu is not only still grinning, but even more eager. "Come on then, we've had round one. What makes you think we're anywhere near done?" he asks, and she blinks in shock. "More?" she asks, and he leans in for a kiss. She can feel him rub his hardening member against her nethers, asking for another invite. "We're going until we can't," he tells her, and her eyes widen. "Now, round two," he says, pulling her back and grabbing her tits before mashing them together. He then thrusts between them, and the slick juices from her sex and the drips of his own cum turn her breasts into another slit for him to fuck. She supports the action by pushing her own breasts together from the sides and nearly shudders at the dirty thrill of having her tits fucked. Of course, she spent her entire life without bearing a child and eating very well, so there was no way that even the most endowed man in the galaxy would get past the sheer amount of breasts she has. But the sensation, oh the sensation as he tried, thrust after thrust, with her breasts growing ever more sensitive to this, before he suddenly abandons her breasts and grabs her by the head. "Take it all," he orders, and she eagerly takes his dick into her mouth. Moments later, she's swallowing the seed, even as her tongue cleans off the last bit off his penis, sucking off his member like a newborn at her mother's tits. He's gone limp again, but he's back to squeezing her breasts, clearly revving up for another round. A yowling cry of pure pleasure rips through the hallway, and Mercy smiles. Mabby's got in her nerd, it seems. "Hey, close your damn door!" Ryu hollers into the hallway as he stomps to the entrance of the room. Mercy chokes down her laughter. Her personal fuck time being interrupted by Mabby's was just funny. Maybe it would be less so if she wasn't in the middle of a cool down in what was effectively a high-end porno. But damn, this couldn't get better. "You left yours open too." Franklin hollers back, and there's a choking laugh from Mabby's room. There's a slam, and the sound of a door bolting shut before Ryu closes the door to their room. The last thing she hears is a cry from Mabby to have her tail pulled. Now, where were we? After all, we owe them an interruption of pure sound. Through the closed bulkheads? These rooms are basically escape pods, you know. She asks, letting him know about how monumental a task that will be. Of course. Otherwise, how will the rest of the crew know that I've done you properly? Ryu asks as he stalks up to her. She quickly gets upright and eyeing him up. Then as he's halfway across the room, she pounces on him and knocks him to the ground. She bites him on the neck, just enough to draw blood, and his hands are in hers again, and squeezing hard. The pain and desire overflows, and she impales herself again on his cock. The rush is stronger than ever as she pistons up and down until an explosion of pleasure slams through her and leaves her limp and deeply satisfied. She licks at the slight flow of blood off his neck as her consciousness starts fading. She wraps her arms and legs around her mate and letting out a trilling chirp of satisfaction. He nuzzles into her eagerly and takes a deep breath of her scent. Her lust spent, she can actually smell him properly past the pheromones. Sharp and spicy with a hint of predatory danger. So few races are uncontested masters of their domain, and it's clear that her new mate is one of them. "That all you've got?" he asks her, and she moans into his chest, unable to actually say anything. After a few minutes of luxuriating, he sighs and slowly rises to carry her to the bed. She never lets go, and after a few moments of fruitless prying, he simply lays down on the bed with her and pulls the blankets over them both. "Good night. Hopefully you let me go before I have to hit the can."
It's a beautiful day on Skora. The planet is known for its placid conditions, making it a popular tourist destination and refueling depot in the outer trade routes, especially for those few thrill-seekers that want to get close to the edge and gaze into the great stonking aberration of death and destruction known as cruel space. All in all, Skora is a wonderful world and home to the TRC 3100 Umbra 1, or the Great Plain Nagasha as they like to call themselves. Lucky bitches to the rest of the galaxy. A very reasonable people, even if their teens and young adults tended to go heavy with massive tail piercings and huge tattoos along their scales. But hey, rebelling teens are almost up there with death and taxes for how ubiquitous they are. Officer. Teresa Tritt felt a rueful smile cross her face at the thought of that. Her daughter in teenage rebellion? Bad enough when Teresa herself had gotten armor piercings or even little hollow projectors bolted to her leather plates. But if Mika follows the local patterns and gets one of those enormous tattoos, she'll have a beast of a time getting rid of it. Unlike the locals, their species doesn't shed their skin every few years. Being a Platin, or the BMO 1100 NER 48, had its ups and downs. Mostly ups, as few among the BMO classifications had natural armor plating along their body. So any sort of job in military, law enforcement, or security gave them a shoe-in, even former punks like Teresa. Still, it would be nice to... Her train of thought slams to a halt as within grabbing distance a male walks by. A BMO 1100 Umbra 3 by the looks of his almost metallic hair tone and easy gait. He notices her staring and gives her a smile that sets her heart aflutter. She regains herself, reminding herself she can't just join a random tribe and marry in. She has a daughter to look after. She had paid for the insemination and everything and loved her little Mika more than herself. even if jumping on him now would mean that she would be the first in 3 generations to actually touch a male, let alone get laid by one. With a monumental effort, she stops herself from following him and simply adjusts her uniform to busy her hand. She's on patrol. She's looking for troublemakers and reminding would-be criminals that there are laws and consequences for breaking them. She doesn't have time to chase down the first man she'd seen in person in over a year. She takes a deep breath and lets it out, centered and calm. Then the heat. The horrible, wonderful heat. Is he? She turns to regard him with her eyes wide. His gait has him easily halfway down the block and is being stared at by every woman he passes by, and several of the locals are outright following him at this point, the sparking scrape of their piercings and chains sending shivers down her spine. He's being followed by one of the local gangs. They're normally too cowardly to try anything but pointless posturing. But if there's a prize like that? Oh yes, that's definitely her business. She mentally notes to ask whoever he's bonded. With what the hell they're thinking wasting his time in season like this, but first things first, get the poor fool out of harm's way. This is probably the first time in his life he's not been surrounded by his wives or mothers every second of the day, and she'll be damned if she lets a male lose his innocence on her watch. You! The man screams out all of a sudden and breaks into a dead sprint. Was he trying to get away from some kind of slaver? Is there a threat in the audience? Is there? He shoulder tackles another man, this one bald, who had been coming from the other direction, and the roll to the ground. Together. Maybe an over-enthusiastic. The other man ends up on top of the first one and starts raining blows down on him with brutal, meaty thunks. Sweet goddess! Someone shouts in shock as the 2 men become a blur of wrath. The Coppertop launches the other off him before kipping up and dodging his opponent's charge and punching him in the side as he passes. Control, this is Officer Tritt. We've got a brawl on 82nd and Winder. Males are involved. She says, activating the communicator on her lapel. Copy that, officer. You're clear to engage. Keep them safe. We're sending a car and ambulance. Control. Both combatants are male. Please advise. Tritt says into her comm, and there's a pause. I'm bringing up your badge camera, please. Holy shit. They're trying to kill each other. Control exclaims as the bald one drop kicks the Coppertop into a ground vehicle so hard that the side dents. Not that he really notices, as he seems to bounce off the bone-jarring impact into a charging left hook so hard it sends the bald one staggering backwards, before he springs forward and into a headbutt that smashes into Copper's face. Both combatants stagger back with Copper holding his bleeding nose. There's a grunt of pain as he rights it before snorting out mucus and blood that he flicks to the ground even as the bald one spits up a bloody loogie. They exchange words, in an unknown language, before starting to pace around each other, each of them seeking an opening to start attacking again, but the initial flurry is over. All right, you two. Good goddess, Officer Tritt starts to say to the pacing men, but that just signals them to attack each other again. The bald one gets in a quick series of 5 punches before he's grabbed by the shoulders and driven into a brutal knee by the other, a shove, and they separate, each trying to both pummel their opponent and deflect the other's attacks. A stomp from the Copper one opens up the bald one to stagger back and take a few glancing blows. Someone brushes by Tritt and she does a double take when a third man, this one very slight, with vaguely slanted eyes and a mop of short black hair shaved bald at the sides, runs along the top of several Nagasha tails, rushes past her and knocks down both fighting men before grabs something from their belts. He shouts something in an unknown language, and the other 2 roar back in a fury. The new third man leaps onto the tails of a few Nagasha to bounce off and race through the choking crowd with the other 2 in hot pursuit. Control. The fight's moving towards the starport. A third has joined in. Is this some kind of insane publicity stunt? Control demands. We've got nearly half the force rushing in after we confirmed the local news hounds got wind of this. We need to be seen trying to corral this madness or they'll be roasting us over a bonfire and, oh damn it, now Thorin Insurance is reporting carjackers. Don't they have their own security? Teresa asks. They do, so they can spin on it. We've got reports of a second brawl some way away from yours, all male as well. Is the entire force out? Yes. This is insane. We have a report of a 4-man fight breaking out near your position. We're calling in the guard for reinforcement. We have no proper training or channels to deal with this. They have null particle launchers. They'll put these berserk men down without hurting them. Null particle? That will drop everyone in the crowd if it doesn't shut down half the city. And how else are we going to get them to stop? Stun bolts and containment spray will just paralyze one and let the other two straight up murder them. We need all of them down at once, or the other one standing may take advantage of it. We don't know what set these men off, but whatever curse or drug they're under will be flattened by the Null. Control argues back, and Officer Tritt has nothing to say, even as she gives chase, and... Oh dear goddess, no. She moans as the leading man slams into a large, dark-skinned one walking around a corner, who instantly goes so berserk, picks him up with one hand and throws him into the other two that catch him and throw him back before tackling into him. All four men hit the ground in a bundle of furious blows, foreign invectives, and pure mindless rage. To everyone's shock, the bald one, who now has his shirt in tatters, lifts up all three of them with a deep roar before slamming the group as a hole into the pavement, then jumping into the mass elbow first. He's caught by the feet of the newest and largest one and launched upwards. He corrects and lands well, the wind blowing up his shirt and showing a patch along his spine with a blinking red light on it. It all falls into place. Someone here is getting some kind of sick thrill out of this and recording, which the entire crowd, including her, are doing. Damn. Control, did you catch that? Frenzy patches. I'm calling it in. We need the guard 10 minutes ago. Control answers just before the newest, biggest one roars into the face of the smallest one as he holds the man by the shirt and starts running with him down the street, knocking aside a pair of officers like they weren't even there. Get back here. The copper one screams in fury as he and the bald one give pursuit. The two of them shove against each other and take quick swipes at one another as the insane fight continues down several blocks before the biggest one is tackled by a smaller form. There's a tumble before the big man is temporarily pinned under a dour-skinned man who throws numerous blows on him for a few moments before the pursuing two tackle him off, even as the dark-haired one tackles into the mess. Then the big one is up again as he grabs the dour-skinned addition and uses the poor man as a club against the other three. He only swings him twice before the copper-haired one gets behind him and tackles him at the knees, even as the dark-haired one jumps up and delivers a double drop kick to the chest. The massive figure of a guard troop transport soars overhead and slams into the street beyond them before unfolding to reveal the Null wave cannon. A non-lethal but exceedingly dangerous weapon, which makes use of the same strange effects prevalent in cruel space to shut down people and technology both. The short burst guarantees that no long-term harm is caused, while it also wipes out any form of axiom-based drug or curses. A frenzy patch counts as both. She tunes herself into the network even as another transport soars overhead and lands near the other brawl. Today will be one to tell her daughter and any granddaughters coming. Up. All troopers brace yourself. Null wave particles are active and about to be unleashed. Everyone brace yourselves. Null! Officer Tritt calls out just as the massive gun powers up and the light drinking energy flashes out. Everyone hits the ground before they're forcibly dropped, and Officer Tritt is no exception. She's fine before the wave hits her, then utterly exhausted and feeling like she's been thrown down a flight of stairs. With a grunt, she opens her eyes. The men. They're still standing, but they're not fighting. They glance around and then run off. Good. The patches were broken. Hopefully, they're all just heading home, but how did they personally resist the Null? How? The fuzziness of Null chases her into unconsciousness, and her memories of the fight fade ever so, several blocks away. Holy shit, they really did shut down the whole city with that, Jake says with a whistle. Also, you punks are assholes. Teaming up like that in a free-for-all. All's fair in love and war, big man. Now where the fuck's our ride? We've got minutes tops before people peel themselves off the pavement and we have to start answering questions, Beck remarks before looking oddly at Franklin. Hold still, he says before grabbing the ginger's nose and writing it properly. Franklin grunts in pain but calms down as his breathing clears and nods thankfully. A shadow passes over them. A third piece of the military? No, a fancy-looking air car that lowers to their level, and in the driver's seat is Mercy. How much? For how long, boys? She asks with a wink as all five pile in. Holy crap! You guys fine with that? Yeah, getting the hell out of Dodge is more important than comfort. Punch it, Batgirl, Lou orders as he and Beck share the front passenger seat as the two smallest guys, so the other three actually have room in the back. Franklin, Marcus, and Jake would all be squashed shoulder to shoulder with Jake in the middle if he wasn't leaning forward to watch out the front and both get his own and give a fair amount of breathing room. You heard the man. Let's get moving, Marcus remarks, and Mercy slams her foot down on the accelerator. It takes only a few minutes to soar to the claw and right into the main cargo bay where dozens of different air cars are already parked. Hey boys, hell of a show you gave us, the pirates call as they clamber out of the car, and Mercy soars off and almost flies into the oncoming air car that has Ryu in it. She nearly pries the door open and grabs him out of his seat to all but shove her. Tongue down his throat, numerous vehicles soar in and cackling pirates hop out. After the cargo deck is nearly filled, the bulkhead doors close and the ship lurches hard before the inertial dampeners fully activate. Ladies and gentlemen, that went off perfectly. We now have 63 luxury air cars, 400,000 in loose credit discs, 200 assorted plasma and laser weapons, nearly 3 tons of explosives, entire petabytes worth of blackmail for local government officials, 100 pounds of stolen jewelry, a literal ton of designer clothing, and one severely pissed off hostage that used to be our employer. If this is any kind of example for what the humans want us to do, then we're riding on the easy lanes. Extra booze tonight, ladies! Woo! Agenda cheers through the speakers, and an answering cheer rises up from the entire crew. The men somewhat less hearty as their own beer and vodka distilling stills haven't been perfected yet. Something wrong? Mabby asks Franklin, who sort of shrugs. Little loud, and while I'm not much of a drinker, I agree with guys. The booze here is bad. We need to get those stills pumping harder. Our own microbrewery sounds wonderful. Mabby purrs. Hey, kitty cat, what's Axiom Energy? I've been hearing about it all over the place, and apparently most everything runs on it, including you girls. But what is it? Franklin asks. Her, and she shrugs. It's life itself, lover boy. It binds us and connects us and holds the universe together. Mabby replies as she wraps her tail around his leg. He raises an eyebrow. Yes, explaining that a tail around the leg meant she wanted it was a little embarrassing, but he didn't need to be told twice, not to mention he was so damn attentive to her needs when they were together. Except in cruel space where Null, its opposite, exists in enormous amounts. Franklin begins as he leans towards her before the sound of an air car revving up draws all sorts of attention. Then it disassembles itself and pulls itself back together into a massive robot woman with rabbit ears and over-the-top front and rear bumpers. The formation of the armor and where the seats ended up give her the look of wearing a bathing suit and a fair amount of jiggle where it would be found on a normal woman. Okay, seriously. Even the transforming robots have giant tits? Robots are brain scans of people. They get massive issues if they don't have body shapes similar to their natural ones. Mabby says in a dumbfounded voice as the equally shocked 20-foot-tall transforming air car robot rabbit woman overlooks them all. Her somewhat digital voice begins. Have I been rescued by pirates? She asks in shock. Seriously, is everything outside of cruel space required to have massive tits? Are men even a thing out here? Brent demands, and all the attention goes to him barring the few that start snickering, such as Franklin. Before we start, a quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. Only 4% of my channel is subscribed. When it reaches 1,000 subscribers, I will release a special video. The first sign was a whisper in the void, an anomaly detected.